Hello,
Hi,
hello.
Pattison. Hi.
Just to date us here for a second, we are 22nd of April 2026, sitting in Bali. Mic check. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear. It's almost as though we're at opposite ends of the same cafe because our previous recording studio option is surrounded by construction noise, but I think we're making do with what we got.
As is the case often here.
Absolutely. Well, so for the first episode of something that we're kind of hatched, shall we get into it?
Let's jump into it. Maybe we can start with so I think V2, we should record this so that we don't have to do it on the fly every time, or we can feel about how we can feel into how we want to do it on the fly. But can you give me a short intro for the Great Spin Up?
Yeah.
And then I've got the
So
docket here for us.
awesome. Yeah. So the great spin up is an exploration in working with the different AI tools that are upon us and how to work towards this kind of abundant sense of the future. But a very practical exploration on like what it's like to actually work with these tools, what's working, what's not working, what's actually worth building. Um, yeah, and I don't know. My perspective also is this idea of spinning up is partly chaotic and partly like part of how evolution works in a sense and how despite all of this movement and spinning we can continue to spin up even though for sure there's going to be many parts that don't necessarily lead to the best outcome but yeah, I think just a really practical exploration in what it's like to be building different ventures and different tools with in the current age.
Yeah,
Anything to add?
cool. Um, and I'll add to it. Yeah, just that there's so much talk, there's so much noise about building with AI, and that you can do things like that, and that there are these super tools. And we've both been noticing that right now, like, yeah, they're really good directionally. They're really good for some things. There's also the practical nature of working with anything or working in anything, that there are these parts that are always difficult. There are these kind of ways that we learn through doing. And
Mm.
so like it's really easy for me at least to like talk about, oh, it's really cool, we can do this and we can do that. And to actually try to take a step back and go, well, what is it really like to do that?
Mm.
And try to also use this as a way to connect with anybody else that is building with these things or is wanting to start to build with tools like this, but doesn't really know how to take those first steps. Maybe this can be an interface for like really sharing specific skills or specific knowledge and doing it in this format, in a podcast format, because we can do it with a relatively low barrier to entry. And these tools are moving so fast and everything's moving so fast that we need to be able to learn on the fly.
Totally. And also, I think it's probably worth mentioning that the idea of the great spin up is also to invite lots of people, different people from different building sectors to come in and have conversations with us as well. So looking forward to that.
Cheers to it. So
Yeah,
I've got a few things on the docket here.
great.
We're going to start with a weekly pulse. So where are we at? What's happening? What's front of mind?
Yeah, like what have we actually been building? What tools have we been working with? I guess what are the things we're figuring out along the way? I'm kind of new to this whole idea of learning in public, so I'm definitely looking for some guidance from you. I can see you're a few steps ahead, so I'm really appreciating that. But
Excellent.
we've actually been I feel like we've been working really well together actually, and we've been producing a bunch of different things in the past month. But this week specifically, I spent a bunch of time focusing on building out our first kind of agent for our venture studio that we're building. And so this is a Hermes agent that runs on a VPS, Hertz VPS, runs through the Telegram gateway. So that's how we communicate with it. And that whole process of setting up and running with it, and also building an LLM wiki or knowledge base. So this agent actually has memory, and that it doesn't rely on some of the big it doesn't rely on some of the big like Claude models or open AI models. It's running predominantly on open source models. There's Gemma, there's a NVIDIA Nematron open model right now. And basically the way I've set it up, so a prompt comes in
Yeah.
from us, and then it gets routed to one of these different open models based on the context and um, how much context is in each message, or if there's a vision aspect to it, or if it's an audio aspect that it routes kind of in a smart way. Um, yeah, there's a lot of
Can I
different kind
reflect
of
this back just so
aspects of this. Please, yeah,
I understand? So the communication, the way that we talk to this is through Telegram. We have a Telegram channel that it chats back and forth with us. The VPS is a virtual private server.
yeah,
Is that right?
yeah. So
So
the virtual private
essentially a
server is
computer that sits somewhere
yeah,
else. We've got a little lag.
yeah, yeah. So
So we've got the virtual
the
private server.
VPS
We've got
lives.
this computer that sits somewhere else.
We definitely have a lag. Good. And
You got,
The VP
you got,
the VPS lives in this instance. It's a Nuremberg, so it lives in Germany. It's always on. You know, you pay a monthly subscription price for it. I think it's like 8 to 10 euros a month, and that gives you. Uh, we have 8 gigs of RAM on it, and we have 80 gigs of memory on it. So there is the ability to actually download local models and run it specifically from the VPS. And then there's the option to run the models through what's called Open Router. And then it runs through API keys that are in the cloud and doesn't rely on the local memory or RAM access. So that's what we've started with, an Open Router system. And because it's on a VPS, it's always accessible. Like we don't need the computer to be open. Like if we were to be running this on an old MacBook or on an old phone or something, in order to interact with it, it would always have to be on. So the good thing about a VPS is you've always got access to it when you need it.
nice. And then Hermes is, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm getting this wrong, but is a architectural layer. So it's a way of orchestrating these models or orchestrating the way that our messages go to the models and come back. And it's an alternative to something like OpenClaw. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. So Hermes Assistant is a open source model that was released about 2 months ago. It's it's been adopted quite quickly as an alternative to OpenClaw, largely because of its ability to have a memory, like a working memory. And then this guy, Andre Karpathy, has come up with this idea of a LLM wiki, which gives it even longer term memory and kind of it builds itself a knowledge base which it can access. So in our instance, we're exploring it to have basically an agent to support us running our Venture Studio, so we can actually ask it questions and it will have information specific to what we've kind of fed it over the months. So I think in terms of an agent that can support a lot of internal cases rather than an OpenAI or Claude instance that goes out to everything. We don't need necessarily access to all the information. We can run that on our individual tools, but then actually having something that can act as an agent that supports us operating our studio. This makes a lot of sense. Any other questions you kind of got at this point, or I could kind of talk about some of the things that have broken so far?
No, that's pretty clear. Yeah, let's talk about specifics. Actually, there is one thing that I realize is that so I've been using, as far as looking at tools, I've been using Claude Code a lot. And I have a local dev environment. I have a folder that has all of the projects that I'm working on my computer. And when I'm using Claude Code, it does retain quite a lot of this information about different projects. So I can reference different projects. It does have some working memory, but it doesn't have a wiki. And this is only on my machine. It's not across multiple. So we don't have there's like kind of what I realize is uh, segments of this agentic workflow work in different ways. But I think what's interesting about this agent that we're working with is that it potentially retains context across sessions and across devices and hopefully across our studio.
Yeah, well, the other aspect to Hermes in particular is that it kind of has this self-improving or selfing aspect to it that the community's kind of really started to build around. So excited to keep exploring this, and I'd be interested to see where we kind of get in the weeks ahead of us. But I've just set this up 2 days ago, and quite a lot of like troubleshooting along the way, including, and this is my second attempt. I've set one up for myself personally, and I found I don't have much background or experience in terminal. I mean, I remember back in the day, like, even before the internet was around, you'd have these terminals, you'd have DOS, you'd have these big, was it 9.5-inch floppy disks, the B drive. And I was in the terminal then. That was great. But I haven't really touched the terminal since I was probably 12 or something. So actually coming back into it to explore building agents has been a really great spot. But there has been some really frustrating aspects of it. So for instance, when I was setting up Hermes on specifically the Hertzler VPS, there was an issue with even just getting access to the server through SSH. So SSH is kind of like your website URL to get to your VPS server. Hertzler, for whatever reason, out of the box, has a real difficulty with accessing it using a password. So you have to kind of reboot the whole thing as soon as you install it to get it working again. And so it took a few cycles to get through that piece. It seems like such a and like out of the gates, what? Why the fuck is this so difficult? It should just kind of work. And you're like the first step, you're kind of blocked. It's like, But it turns out that's quite a well-known bug. But hopefully it will sort itself out with Hertzler relatively soon. But there are actually some other VPS services that seem to have made it easier to start to work with these tools. And then the other troubleshooting that I've kind of been focusing on this week is getting, so they call there's a few aspects to this architecture, right? So you've got the VPS, which is the server. You've got the agent, which is Hermes, which is kind of the orchestration layer. And then you've got the models and the providers. So where does Hermes send each request for output? And then you've got a gateway. And so the gateway is, how do you communicate with this agent? And then how does it route? So in this instance, we're using Telegram as the gateway. And then within our Telegram, we've got a Telegram group with different topics. So the idea is to design each topic within Telegram with slightly different rules and slightly different functions and personalities for the agent. For instance, the two first ones I set up, other than general, was a systems topic or thread and a troubleshooting one, because particularly getting this thing set up, there's quite a lot of troubleshooting to get through. However, it's responding well. It's responding well to you as well. Adding some security around Hermes is really limiting who can communicate with your agent. So I've only got it so that our Telegram IDs can communicate with it, which means it can't really get hacked, at least not in a way that seems particularly easy to do. But I haven't done like a full security audit, but that seems to be one very easy thing to do. Yeah, what else? Is there anything else jumping out at you that is kind of interesting to double click on and go into? Because I feel like there's a lot of weeds I can go into, but I'm not sure how interesting or relevant this is at this stage.
Yeah, I think right now it's a watch this space. And with the main note being that we've set it up and we haven't really started using it. Like there's, to me, with a lot of things, this is super interesting to be able to like intellectually go through the exercise, which is different to, all right, how useful is it? Like, are we actually using this? How are we using it? What are we doing with it? Like the intention here is to be able to feed this model, feed this bot a bunch of things in it, and be able to come back and say, don't forget these things. Here's a weekly review. It's the statistics for each of the ventures. And these are all issues that we're solving in one way or another. It's just how we using an agent to help us with some of these things. Yeah, so I think right now it's watch this space.
Yeah, I think that's a really good focal point. Like at this point, I'm kind of setting it up as like a COO for us, someone that can really help us like operate these and stay across everything, and also keep the two of us on task. And largely, we're going to be feeding it with tasks, but it'll also keep track of like, what are the open questions? What are the open things? Maybe what are the things we should reprioritize? Having, like our kill criteria for different ventures a little bit more, less emotional. So this will be a very unemotional.
Yeah. Objective.
Although we can give it some personality, but yeah, the idea is to keep it very objective. Yeah. Although I will say it's already told us a joke and a pun, which they weren't that funny, but there was still something.
Do you remember them?
No, I don't remember them off the top of my head, but I will also say, and I haven't told you this yet, but as part of setting up these agents, they have what's called like a soul document or a soul markdown file. And with that, you can kind of give it its like basic architecture. And I've actually embedded it with a little bit of influence from Buckminster Fuller and this idea of trim tabs and always looking for what are the small things that have large impact. So let's maybe leave Hermes for now, but at least that's a bit of a start, and let's see where we get to in the coming weeks. I'm happy to give updates on that.
Let's do a check-in next week of just a quick piece on Hermes, and I'm thinking about like how we use this format to continue to track how these projects are going. And maybe the quick check-in next week is like, what did we use Hermes for? What did it fail at? Or like what was it less helpful than it was worth the effort, and what was it like exceedingly helpful at?
Yeah, agreed.
Set up just a little bit because the rain is coming in.
I like it. I feel like I've just got a zoomed out perspective of you now. What done this week?
So as far as
part of the weekly pulse, like what are you on this week?
Weekly pulse this week, been building an internal outreach tool, which we realized is essentially a CRM that is custom to what we need, and then is using various bits and pieces from projects that I've been working on. So for example, for this, I read about a podcast where you can go on Apple Podcasts and you can see the RSS feed and you can pull in all the information from a particular person with an explanation of what their podcast is about. And with that in mind, I went, maybe we could build this into the ventures that we're doing and go, all right, who are the people that I know? Who are the people that you know? Who are the people that are out there on the internet that would have significant overlap with the things that we're doing? And could we click a button and have an agent go and pull in all of that context and give us a list of, oh, these people might be interested in working with you. And then build in different features that would be really useful for our particular use case. What I've been finding is the tools that we're using, like these generative AI tools, Claude Code, etc., will give you a lot more than is necessary. Like the actual bits that we need it's quite a small subset of all of the stuff that you get given. Give me 1 second. The other thing that I've noticed is when we're working with AI, there are lots of, like, it's directionally correct in a lot of ways, but there are lots of gaps. So another thing that we've been working on is land library. And maybe you want to give a little bit of context on land library because you articulate this better than I do. And then I can talk about the data pipeline and the intricacies of it.
Well, I'm certainly happy to get into some of the ventures in a bit more detail. However, I think it would be more interesting for everyone else, at least at this point, to better understand the tools that you're working with. So you mentioned Claude Code. So as you've been building this week, like what has your stack been? How are you working with it? What are you finding are the limitations of the tool so far, and where are you finding that it's really, I think, exceeding? And I'm also under the impression that Claude just dropped 4.7, so I'm not sure if you've played around and noticed much of a difference with that.
Yeah, a little bit. So mostly I'm working with Claude Code and a terminal, and what that looks like is opening up a terminal, typing the command Claude, which I've already authenticated it, so it's connected to my Claude Code instance. And then I've given it access to the files on my computer, and it's also integrated with a bunch of tools. It's integrated with Vercel for shipping products. It's integrated with GitHub for pushing my files to GitHub to have a file dish. There's been a leak from Vercel, who are a huge tech company.
I thought you were saying a leak in space. But it looks like there's two types of leaks that we're talking about right now.
Actual rain on the computer. Hardware and water don't mix. Wow. And then within Claude Code, there's a couple of pieces. There's a thing called Cline that I've been using for a lot of the coding that I've been doing. And that's something that you install and then run through terminal as well. And what that looks like is in terminal, typing Cline, it opens Cline in a browser. And that gives you a Kanban style way to work with prompts to the agent. So I'll say, hey, I want to work on land library. Can you get the context for it? And Claude Code will go and find the file, and go, okay, I understand the structure of this. I understand what the authentication layers are. And then using Klein, I can give it different tasks and it will go away and do those tasks and I can work on different pieces. And the innovation of Klein is that it lets you work on different features and different parts of the code base. And then when you're committing them, it is supposed to intelligently only pull through the bits that you've been working on and allow you to work on two different parts of the same code base so that things don't break while you're working on it.
Okay.
That's a pretty useful part of the stack. Another thing that I realized that we've been building things, we've been designing, but without having a UI, UX background, it's kind of hard to understand how many different screens, say, there will be in a particular product. And so kind of a game changer this week has been using Claude Design, and I can give it a code base. And this is just at claude.ai/design. I can give it a code base from my computer. I can give it a GitHub link. I can give it a screenshot and I can say, hey, this is what I'm working with. Can you show me what we've already got? So I can go and kind of generate or regenerate what I've already got into a visual layout without having to do any of the back end wiring. And then I can say, cool, what's missing here? What are the screens that we're implying exist but don't actually exist? And can you go and generate those in the same format as what we've already got? So it can go and fill in the gaps. And then I can go and take that and export it or hand it off to Claude Code or any other coding agent, I think. One thing that I think we've both started to notice is that when we're using different tools and we're handing different things off, there's this like mismatch in wiring between different things. Like, maybe you want to talk about a couple of the design tools that we've been using and
Yeah, I mean, certainly happy to
this
get into that as well.
handoff.
Before I do though, you mentioned that you run um, some of your queries locally on your machine. So I'm curious, like how you typically structure that versus running it through an API, and what you've learned maybe about token efficiency, in terms of being like cost effective with how to work with these tools.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of stuff right now about Anthropic specifically changing how expensive it is basically to use tokens, or how many tokens a specific model uses. And to give a very high level explanation of this, there are different models that have different costs. Anthropic right now they have until recently had three different models: Haiku, Sonnet, and Opus.
Perfect.
Opus
Yeah.
being the most expensive, Sonnet being a little bit less expensive, but still quite good. Haiku, I think, is like 1/10 the cost of Opus. This is ballpark. I don't actually know of my head, but it also doesn't think as hard. And this is all 4.6, like version 4.6. And they've just brought out Opus 4.7. And that tool, as far as I can see, is slower. And I'm not seeing a significant difference. Maybe it's doing a better job the first time around, but I'm not going and reading the code ever. So I don't know what efficient it is. I know I have a group chat with a bunch of people that are building, and they're also raising questions about it. They're like, look, this is supposed to be better. Whether or not it's actually better is another question mark. I believe that it is. The benchmarks say that it is. Yeah, there's this part of it. There's the different models. And then as far as like cost efficiency, I have a friend who's the CTO for a bank, and he's been using a lot of different agents to build and has, I think, is very efficient with what he does and does a lot of research, is very rigorous. And he was saying that when you're on one of the plans, like the max plan for Claude, you pay a monthly subscription and they give you a token allowance. But that is much more cost effective than just going through the API. So API, you pay per token, per 1,000 tokens or 1,000,000 tokens. So wherever I can, I'm running things on my computer through the plan that I have,
Mhm.
other than say I could set up an agent or I could set up the Anthropic API key in a project that we have. And then and I program it to say, when I click this button, I want you to go and do this research and then take that data and put it in a database so that it sits there and I can reference it, or so that it's part of this larger database. Where I can, I'm doing that through the plan. And it has the added benefit of we can have called skills that live basically in files on my computer. So I say, hey, can you use this skill to go and do deep research? And previously I've defined a skill to say, all right, the deep research is search the topic on the web, find out who all of the experts in that field are, find out what their specific things are, and then go and make a plan based on that information, rather than our model would go and do this normally, which would be go and make a plan on its own that is generated from all of this data, not the specific nuanced expert data that I wanted to replace.
Yeah, interesting. It sounds quite similar to what I've been exploring with the architecture around Hermes and the knowledge base there. So perhaps we should do a little sprint and put our heads together on that. Yeah, I feel like just to keep us moving on the docket, it might be worth. I don't know what else is on the
Yeah.
docket. We kind of put a few things on there, and I feel like there's lots of different ways we could go.
So
However, we don't need
we got
to
a few
cover everything in
things
our first
here.
call.
We got the specific things that we're working on this week, so we've kind of delved into that. We haven't touched on Build Guild,
Okay.
and I think a part of this that would be interesting is what's the difference between what we can do and what like really moves the needle. We can quite easily design things, we can quite easily build things, we can quite easily ship things. Something that still holds true is that getting people to use this stuff, and it's actually probably the harder bit. Hard is not the right word for it. A different skill set to just going and creating the thing. And then also on the docket, we've got quick tool stack discoveries. So we've talked about forward design, other ways we work, working in sprints, unboxing things.
Yeah, I think let's do a quick one on like what we've learned about how to actually work together with these tools, kind of in the same room. I feel like that's really kind of practical.
Yeah, good idea.
And like I mean, just to start, it feels like where we've landed at so far is this idea of being in the same space and doing these 45-minute sprints, and at the end of each sprint, a bit of show and tell. And just the other day, we were also like having at least defining what would success look like at the end of each sprint for each of us. And then, kind of parallel working and giving little bits of feedback along the way where necessary, but without context shifting. And then also understanding in terms of sequence around kind of the sequence of building, like design, ideation, research, design, build, and kind of figuring those things out so that we're not building something that's kind of half designed and then kind of trying to unscramble it halfway. But I know you're a big fan of building the rocket as it takes off, which I think obviously has its merits, but also like there's some aspects where it can come undone quite quickly. Is there anything else that's jumping out on like how we work together that might be insightful?
I think double tapping on a couple of these things will be useful. The sprints is something that we came to kind of organically, and then it's been refined. So we were going and doing, working blocks of 4 or 5 hours, sometimes longer, 8, 9 hours, and realized that we're getting burnt out by that. And also, I think it's like the nature of these LLMs or working with generative things is you can just easily go down rabbit holes. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, that needs to be fixed. Oh, this, it's very expansive in the way that the work goes. Then time time boxing ourselves, saying, all right, let's start to work in sprints. Let's give ourselves 45 minutes. And then, like you said, oh, this is what success looks like. Or at the end of this sprint, I would like to have login and the sign-in process all working so that somebody can come and create an account and be on this platform. Cool. I think that has been a game changer in how we can like move things. Building the rocket as it takes off. This was a big learning. It's like you would design something, hand it off to me. You would be like, how do you want this? I would say, oh, I want the code exported so that I can take the code. Oh, but if there's any extra buttons in that code export, it's going to fuck up what I'm doing. And then you would send something through and then you would work for another 5 minutes while I was implementing it. And you would go, oh no, I have a new version. And I would be like, oh, seriously? All right, now I'm going to either next time wait another 5 minutes for the new version to come through, or so we kind of shifted this work to being, all right, finish doing the design, get it so you're like mostly happy, and then give it to me, because once I implement it, all of those buttons, they need to go into different parts of it, and the implications of, oh, there's one more input field, and this is something that I didn't realize until recently. One more input field requires routing to the database and writing database rules and reordering the schema, or changing the type of input from, oh, this is going to be a multi-selected thing to a single selected thing. It changes it in the database. And so it's like a bunch of extra rewiring. And every time you go and do this with coding agents, there's the potential for it to completely mess it up. So like, just to create another version of the data. So instead of like updating the data schema, it'll just write a whole new one. And then you're like clicking the button. Why is the button not working? Oh, because it's connected to the old data model that was in the version of this that was an hour ago.
There's a line that's coming up for me, which is early mistakes cast long shadows. And so like I think how do we design for less long shadows? I think the other thing that we've learned in our sprints or our workflow is also being quite tight on scope and not being, as we described, about things and having things kind of creep past, which to be honest is just really good design and build practice anyway, to not keep extending build. And almost by having these 45-minute sprints keeps us within that frame quite tightly. And I don't know about you, but also since we've gone to more of this sprint approach, I feel like we've got healthy relationships with ourselves as well. And like what you were describing, these tools are very engaging and it's very easy to fall into these rabbit holes and kind of get taken away by them. But actually having a healthy relationship with how to use the tools and your own sense of time. Oh, we're also very much looking for how do we build these tools and still have a healthy relationship with each other and ourselves and everyone around us. And I don't know about you, but I'm actually really excited by our ability to produce more but work significantly less. And the idea of just like hard charging, 10 hours a day, every day of the week, although with these tools is definitely very enticing, I'm not sure it ultimately ends up in producing better results because you kind of end up spiraling down rather than spinning up. I feel like that could be a nice thing to keep us grounded, so to speak. Let's shift to the next session because I think next on the docket was this idea of doing a bit of a deep dive on one thing or one or two things. And I know what was on there was this idea of like sharing what we build, or this idea of like going to market. Some people talk about this being like distribution, and yeah, I feel incredible in what we've been able to build, and it's been quite slow in having input and getting people actually using the tools that we've built. And obviously we built them so we feel like they're valuable, but then when it actually meets the road and getting feedback, it's been a little bit slow. I'm not sure about you, but I've also been a little reluctant to put too much energy into outreach because from my mind, the energy and the effort, as soon as you share this with like 10, 15, 50 people, all of a sudden you have much more inbound to manage. If I share this with 50 friends, I kind of feel like I need to start replying to all 50 of them when they give something back. And then, so there's been a slight kind of reluctance to let these out into the wild a little bit. I know with our first kind of two products that we've started to share so far, Land Library and Animates, it's been kind of how do we share this with maybe 10 to 20 people? and get feedback on that before we share it more broadly. And then within that, like focusing this week on actually building this idea of an outreach engine, or kind of like helping us identify like who in our networks. And I know that you've built out this outreach engine using our LinkedIn data that we exported. Who in our networks that could be worthwhile? And this is kind of this idea of the trim tab again, like how, as maybe venture studio founders, we focus on the first 5, 10, 15, maybe 20 relationships that we share these products with, but then scale themselves almost. Like there's network effects embedded in every relationship that we help nurture. And that as founders, we're not then focusing on trying to get this to hundreds or thousands of people. We're more interested in the quality of, that first circle of people that we have direct relationships with. And yeah, really understanding the network effects of healthy relationships and healthy partnerships. And yeah, I'm curious to see how that kind of plays out over the next few weeks as well.
Yeah, me too. It's also when we do share these, at what point do you share them, and what is the kind of expected relationship that you're building with people that are potentially using them, right? Because especially sharing it like with your inner circle, with my inner circle, it's like we care about these relationships and we want to make sure that what we're sharing is good quality, and balancing that with sharing it soon enough so that we're figuring out if this is something that people will actually use. What also comes up to me is, this book, The Mum Test?
Yeah, I think so. Like if your mum can understand it.
This one is, your mum's probably going to love anything that you make. And if you go to people and you say, hey, I made this, what do you think? It's going to be super rare for them to go, oh, I don't really like that bit, or it's not good enough. So the whole idea is like presenting things in a way, or presenting things to people, or both, that don't out you as, hey, I've already built this thing. What do you think? Your judgment of this thing kind of reflects on me. Like stepping away from that and instead trying to get an objective view of how useful the thing is. So like having these initial users is, I think, really important, but also finding people that are genuinely wanting to solve this. And it comes back to like the pre-build things. Like, yeah, we can go and build all of this stuff, but if it's not actually solving a specific problem, if it's not actually like a real need for somebody, then we're just kind of shortening the startup cycle of build a thing, test it, figure out if it's something that people actually want. To me, it just puts more emphasis on the upfront kind of research behind it, or at least spinning out a VZ or a V1, so that you can get like real feedback on whether or not it's something that's useful.
So I found with my early research, my early outreach, it was it's all largely been on. I mean, it's actually all been on WhatsApp. Before I've shared something with them about, I've said, hey, I'm doing some research on this. Yeah, I'm doing research on X topic. I'd love your opinion. Here's three or four simple questions. I'd love your thoughts. Send me a message or a voice note. And my response rate for that has been about 90%, and the feedback's been incredible. And then after I've received the feedback and then shared with them the prototype and asked for a little bit of feedback on that, and that's kind of been part of the agreement, there hasn't been as much and as quick response. And also, I think it's because, once we send something that's actually kind of working or half working or in prototype form, you can kind of see it, but it's a little bit harder to provide maybe feedback with. Like the open questions, like the research questions, the feedback became really easy. And then it's like, what do you think of this? Maybe that's part of the mum piece. Like, oh, I don't want to be critical, even though like I've been asking specifically, like, hey, I'd love brutal feedback. Any thoughts? There's no right or wrong. We're not going to get offended, but we really want to know, kind of what we're building here, and if it's worthwhile. But still, that response has been tough. In fact, I had one friend just write back to me yesterday. Go, man, I've still been sitting with your land book prototype, and I'm still not sure how I feel about it. I'm trying to get feedback to you, but it's not coming. And I was like, even that was useful feedback. So yeah, I'm finding that an interesting way to start the outreach, although I'm not sure how effective it actually is at the end of the day. That old adage of people don't really know what they want you to build, but they'll use it when it's working. That's not it, but something like that. I don't know. What did Steve Jobs used to say?
Yeah, it's yeah. I think to me it says a lot about the time that we're in. Like I've spent
Mm,
time this week actively not being on my phone, making sure that every time I'm on my phone, there's a timer set and I know exactly what I'm doing there so that it's not like stealing my attention.
mm,
And I feel that everybody is feeling this. They're just maybe not as sensitive to it as I am, or like maybe coping with it in different ways or doing different things and realizing that everybody is dealing with this noisy space
yeah.
that is the internet, that is AI always asking you a question after you ask it a question, that is social media taking every bit of attention that you have. Just like
Mm.
that it's a noisy space and it's only going to get noisier, I think. And
I
so,
love the irony that you're talking about noisy space as your space is getting noisy.
yeah, yeah, can you hear music in the background?
Yeah, yeah. We should do a whole episode on how noisy the space is in a noisy space. That could be that could be one of our deep topics, like noise
But
versus signal. I feel like that's actually a really important piece to spend some time thinking and exploring and figuring out how to better build for as well. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
it's a really good point.
so, and coming back to these AI tools as well, is that signal doesn't always look like what the AI tells you it is. Like all of these tools are giving us answers. It doesn't mean it's it doesn't mean it's an actual answer. Saying no, sorry, there's no significant signal here is not in the mandate of most of these tools, which is a real problem.
Mm.
And I'll try and give it a concrete example, is that if we go and so I've got a tool that builds, I've got a tool that builds a tool every night. It goes to Reddit, it looks through Reddit, it then runs it through, it looks for problems in subreddits, and then it takes a list of those problems and it runs them all through about 6 gates to try and weed out whether or not it's a real problem worth building
Do
something
you do,
for.
do you have one of your gates called Bill? Is one of your gates called Bill? Because if not, you should add a seventh gate called Bill.
Are they
The
called
Bill the Bill Gates filter?
build gates?
Build Gates. All right.
None of the. I wonder what the Bill Gates filter.
The Bill Gates filter. Yeah. What would
But the point being, like, it might come back and say, "Oh yeah, there's significant evidence here that Bill Gates wants you to build this Bill Gate." And what's the evidence? I don't know. What's the the thing? I don't know. But it came back with an answer, and I think that's a trap that we sometimes can fall into, is just like taking any answer as, "Oh yeah, that's a good enough answer," rather than taking that responsibility of building the build gates.
building the Bill Gates build gates? Yeah. No. These tools aren't particularly critical unless you prompt them to be. And yeah, they're very good at being. Oh, that's a great idea. Keep going. Keep exploring. I've found as part of I don't call them gates, but I've been running this kind of framework that looks at a bunch of different questions and two of the ones I keep coming back to are this idea of red teaming. So be critical, try to figure out like what's wrong with the thinking, what's wrong with this idea, and then the second one, Elon Musk's used quite a lot is this idea of first principles. So how do we bring everything back to like its simplest form, like from a first principles perspective? Is this even of value? Is making this going to solve something, or is this just more medicine type thing that's keeping people sick in a way? And I like always coming back to those points. It feels quite valuable. And then it's like, all right, cool. Now at least we've gone through those more critical lenses or gates. We definitely need to do these gates. This is brilliant. All right, we'll go from there. But I'd
uh,
actually
so
I'd
this
love to
idea
do a
of
deep dive
lenses.
on all the different kind of lenses or gates or whatever you want to call them at a later point. I think that would be a really nice kind of deep dive to explore, and then also how that kind of evolves over the next 3 6 months. Anything else on the kind of like sharing what we build or the go to market piece that you think is relevant at this particular point for this deep dive section of the docket?
Yeah, actually, a question for you, or a musing potentially is. All right, let's work on the assumption that the space of tools and especially digital tools being created is going to get busier. And the digital distribution mechanisms have traditionally been SEO, How does someone use
Search.
keywords to find something? Partnerships. How does somebody scale word of mouth, sort of? Word of mouth is obviously a big and strong, the most effective distribution channel. Then you've got things like founder-led marketing. You've got paid advertising. You've got underpaid advertising, all sorts of social, organic social, and paid social. Like, there are all of these ways to get products into the hands of people that need to use them. Do you think that there are any ways that will emerge or are emerging in this kind of agentic age? And will they have a bigger impact, or will it just be like a slightly different version of these things that we have? Like, I can see SEO, like search, for example, is sort of morphing, but it's morphing from Google search to agentic search. And it's essentially the same underlying thing with a different rule set applied to it.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
does that make sense? I
we're
feel
seeing.
like I
No,
implied the question, but
absolutely.
maybe didn't.
No, absolutely. I think we're seeing the early stages of how AI companies are starting to think of advertising, for instance, and tool discovery or product discovery through these tools. Or, obviously there's been some big pushback. I'm not sure if you saw the Super Bowl commercials that Anthropic put out against OpenAI for their advertising campaigns, but just brilliant. Like this idea of asking your AI for relationship advice and then upselling you a cougar dating app.
Sounds like you have mummy issues. Maybe you should go on.
Incredible. So, and I don't know about you, but like I've certainly noticed that like I'm finding a lot of tool discovery directly through like the main agents I'm using for my research and ideation are Kimi and Perplexity Pro, and I kind of
Mm.
I work across those in their different frames, and yeah, like I typically end up exploring what they suggest. I'm not like Googling anything anymore. And then it's what's coming up in different groups or conversations. So I get the sense that this idea of, curated, tailored, small kind of WhatsApp groups and Telegram groups are also a really good source because there's an initial kind of filter. There's an initial curation of the people that are there and then what's actually being shared. So I think that those streams will become a little bit more popular as well going forward. Yeah, I'm not sure SEO is, I mean, yeah, I'm not sure how the space is going to emerge. I don't have like a broad perspective on it, but I have in the past studied Marshall McLuhan, who's this kind of media theorist, and he's one of his more famous quotes is that this idea of the medium being the message. So when the medium changes, how does that message change, and then how are different things communicated and then shared? So yeah, I'm also getting a bit of a sense that there'll be a reversion to very small local instances as opposed to all these big global brands. Um, and like what are the tools that are like locally important for you? There's quite a few industry experts that think that apps won't exist in the future. We'll just have like an agent that manages everything. So like how many of these products or apps or tools are actually really important to market individually, as opposed to maybe actually connecting them to an agent that pre-vets everything for you anyway. So you don't need to consider that. So I'd say that's probably a very possible scenario where we're no longer marketing to people anymore, where we're communicating to agents in a way so that they can make an informed decision of like, hey, is actually this a good fit based on the needs of who I'm building for? So yeah.
Yeah, interesting. We have this, I tend to agree with you, and we need to separate out what I would really like versus what I think will actually happen.
Mm.
And I think there's some overlap there, but I see a world well, let me ground this in kind of like my thinking, or at least put the context there, is that I believe humans are incredibly visually driven. Our brains,
Mm.
like more than half of the neurons in your brain are visual, and we're storytelling animals. And so I think that anything that is specific to humans will have some visual element, or could have some visual element, and needs to have some storytelling element or some kind of connection to something that is longer term, that is a larger story. What I would really like is to have a device that doesn't have a screen, so it's not trying to steal my attention
Mm.
from a visual perspective, but that it's a tool that
Mm.
goes and does things. And in that case, the like agent that is on there that manages everything and has all these apps and does the things that the apps would do. The way that it discovers that stuff is not how I would discover things, and what interests that agent is not what would interest me. And I think that my time horizon on this is like 10 years out, but I would, the pace at which everything is moving, I would shorten that and say we're probably like whatever I think is actually going to be the case. I think things are going to move really quickly.
Yeah,
Like
I was just wondering.
You see the start of.
Sorry, go.
Sorry, go ahead.
Definitely a little laggy this first episode, but we'll get there. No, I was just picturing like what does it look like? Are agents going to respond to like witty, instead of witty copy, like witty binary code or something? Like, is an agent going to be persuaded to explore one tool over another because it's got like an aspect of it that kind of speaks to its character in a unique way? A little bit like how we are kind of vulnerable or susceptible to a really beautiful image with some catchy copy on it. Like, you look at the advertising campaigns in the 60s and 70s, like maybe not the 70s, the 60s, but they're just like so beautifully crafted in many ways. Yeah, I wonder what the agentic layer of that might be. Or is it just like pure code efficiency? Like, yes, that's the piece.
Well, no, this is exactly what I was getting at as well, is that like you look at, what do they call the agentic social media that all the open claws were on, and they started making their own language?
Yeah.
Maltbook. Yeah. Okay. So on Maltbook, you got like these agentic memes, and then some of it is like they start using their own language, or they start like making up their own language. It's like, why are you translating? Why are these agents, agent to agent, going to all this trouble to translate into English or Mandarin or, Russian, any language, when they can just communicate in a different way? Or like Meta set up these agents that they ended up pulling the plug on because they got nervous about it, because these two agents started talking to each other, and then they started to essentially negotiate, and they made up a language that when it was decrypted was like, oh, they were using balls and balloons. I forget the details, but basically like they were negotiating. These two agents were negotiating using some made up form of, bits and bobs and
balls and balloons. Definitely male bots.
There's also this whole, we won't jump into it right now, but there's this whole thing of the encoded, the way that the creator imprints their own personality into something that they create. So yeah, balls and balloons definitely made.
Right, I feel like that point leads us quite nicely to our next segment, which I'm very, very excited to explore, actually.
Me too. So we've got a bunch of AMA questions here, and they are written specifically by our respective agents that we have been talking to for a while. So they kind of know quite a lot about us. And I haven't read through either of these. There's a AMA questions Thai and there's an AMA River. How should we do this? I'll post your AMA questions in the chat here, and then you'll be able to see them, and we can just pick out the ones that are interesting.
I can actually pull it up on my phone, but I think AMA sections are always great, particularly in these kind of like weekly podcast formats. And obviously, considering this is our first episode, I think it's great that we have our agents helping us out with the AMAs. However, having said that, even once we get an audience, I think it would still be really nice to have at least part of the AMA asked from our agents, and even the different guests that we invite. We can invite them to ask the agents what questions they want asked. So I think this will be a really interesting segment as we continue to grow this side of it. I would say let's pick 2 questions each from our own list, and then 1 question from each other's list, and then if either of us feel really compelled to also answer the question on the other side, I think let's be open to that as well.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, you want to key us off?
I need a second to read through that. All right, I've got different categories here. I've got ventures and building, nomadic life, inner work, money and strategy, and wild cards. I'm gonna go with one from building. Spicy. An agent asked, all right, I'm gonna give you AMA questions. Would you like saucy and spicy? Would you like vanilla? Or would you like somewhere in between? And I asked for some vanilla questions. All right. This is a little bit of a pick a one at random. How do you feel about discipline versus following energy? Because those two things seem to be like they're in constant conflict.
Hmm.
This is pretty relevant. I really want to flow with whatever I'm working on that day. And I forget who says it. Maybe it's Mark Andreessen. And I've also noticed that I'm the king of
Attributing chords.
giving the wrong attribution. So
We,
thank you,
we, we
Mark, if
can
this is
fix it.
you. If it was somebody else,
We can fix
I
all that in the
appreciate
show
you
notes.
anyway. We could run this at the end and have it in the show notes, the missed attributions and where they really came from.
I think that sounds like a good game show that we should do at some point.
Einstein said. So how do I think about discipline versus energy flow? I think they both have their place, and I think it's on the individual it's on you and I to discover what works really well. Somebody that I admire recently, we were talking about the gym, and we were in the gym together, and it was about 3:30 p.m. and I was really grumpy. I was saying, I'm tired, I'm grumpy, it's the middle of the afternoon, this isn't my best time of day, or. And they were like, you know what, Ty? Being tired is not an important factor right now. Like, we're here to do this specific thing. And so I started thinking about it like that. Like, yes, follow your greatest excitement. Yes, work on things that really like motivate you. It's helped me a lot to focus on discipline when it needs to happen. For example, if I know that I'm going to go and do exposure therapy, like hot cold, instead of negotiating every time and spending the energy on negotiating whether or not I'm going to go into the cold, it's like, no, I'm here and I'm going to go in, and I'm not even going to think about whether or not I'm going into the cold plunge. I'm just going to go into the cold plunge. And actually having that amount of discipline. Jocko Willing talks about this all the time, like that discipline will set you free. And I think in some areas, being very disciplined really helps, and it allows you to flow with the energy. So it's a bit of both are important, but I think in their right place. And I think discipline, the consistently showing up to do your best, working for X number of hours every day and doing it in sprints like we have been, like having these frameworks for discipline really help us be able to flow.
What's coming up in response to that is this channel Bashar, and he talks about 5 different principles, and I'm not going to mention them all here, but he talks about like do what really excites you, what really lights you up, and do it to the best of your ability. That piece, like to the best of your ability, I feel like there is some discipline embedded in that. However, when there is like a real reluctance or resistance, that maybe that might be the limit of your actual ability. Because I also look at like what we've been doing in the past few weeks, and we could just keep crunching and burning through, and we could be saying that's to the best of our ability. However, it's also a really natural boundary that's actually healthy in many ways. Figuring out what is discipline and what is maybe quite is kind of neglecting the reality of what's to the best of your ability, because I see a lot of people that are very disciplined and they're these hard charging types, and they work 70-hour weeks, and I'm not sure that is the healthiest way to go, because in the whole span of things, the relationships that suffer are huge. Yeah, it sounds like some disco music's kicked up at your end.
It's a party, yeah, absolutely. I think the difference though is the inputs versus the outputs, and this is easier said than done, but it's if I am disciplined about the inputs and try to let go of the outputs, then as in if I'm disciplined about the amount of time that I spend showing up consistently, doing my best, then and letting go of it will generate this much money, it will get this many users, it will make this many ventures, and focus on the things that I can control. I think that's probably where that line is, for me at least.
Let's move on. So I've got a question. I've actually got a question for both of us. The question is titled Bet. Each of you name one prediction about AI and building that you're willing to be publicly wrong about. The loser buys dinner. I'm not exactly sure who the loser buys dinner for entirely. And what are you putting on the table? It did also suggest buying dinner in Lisbon, so I'm not sure if we want to be geographically tied to that. Yeah, one prediction about AI and building that you'd be willing to be publicly wrong about. Maybe let's put a a time frame on it? What do you think? Like 6 months?
Yeah, let's go 6 months, and willing to be publicly wrong about. I think this ties back to the learning in public thing. Like, I'm trying to let go of the being publicly right or wrong about stuff and just be publicly right or wrong about it. I think it's very freeing. So something that, oh man, it's really a party here. A prediction that I'm going to make is that in the next 6 months, we will see will be framed, but there will be companies launching that have agent CEOs. And I don't know how publicly the company will have an agentic CEO, but it'll be, for example, a marketing agency that maybe has a person behind it, but the actual thing that runs it will be an agent, and that agent makes all the decisions and asks the human to make payments and writes job posts and orchestrates all of the humans.
Yeah, I mean that's actually a prediction that you don't even need to make because it's already here. It's already currently the place. There's actually entirely AI built organizations that have hired basically these meat puppet CEOs so that they can legally register in a place. And these meat puppet CEOs are just there for show. They don't do anything actually other than just sign a document. So that's already here.
What are the, do you have any examples? Are these working?
Yeah, they're working. I don't have them off the top of my head, but they talk about them in the Moonshots podcast. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So definitely check
Wow.
that out.
Okay.
All right. I will. All right. So a prediction that I would love, like, so in 6 months, I think that we, the two of us, and this Animates project we're building will actually be able to communicate with animals. So you'll be able to take an audio capture of what your cat is mewing or your dog is barking, and you'll be able to communicate back to it in a way that people can't at the moment. I would love to be publicly wrong about that, but I'd also love to work towards having that possible. I know there are some apps that are starting to already do that, but it seems to be a little bit more of a gimmick than an actual piece. I think what we're building with Animates in terms of like having, you know, the breed knowledge base, all of the information around, vet visits and all that stuff, and, keying in the observations that owners kind of make over a period of time will give it the context that it needs to really start to inform this communication layer. So yeah, that's one prediction.
Interesting. The doctor.
Yeah, totally. But for everyone, not just a Dr. Doolittle, anyone will have capacity for that. And like my excitement around that is, so many people already treat the animals they live with. I'm not even going to say pets because I think pets is kind of demeaning to the relationship anyways, but the animals that they live with, they treat them like family. And kind of what we've learned in our research with Animates is that although they think of them like family, the way that they treat them is, or the way they understand them is still a bit scattered and haphazard. And if we can provide a tool that allows people to be more supportive towards the preventative side, particularly of healthcare with their pets, then this ends up being a really valuable piece. So yeah, I'm excited to move resources and energy in that direction. I'm super excited for that. And to like improve these family relationships and like such beautiful family relationships. And, when that happens on a household scale, how does that happen on more of a global scale across other species of animals as well? So super fascinated by that perspective. Like for instance, this spot in Bali, a new bird's nest just arrived, and I would love to set up a little speaker to communicate. Hey, bird, you're welcome here. Make yourself at home. I'm looking forward to meeting your kids. I can't wait to, this kind of like, and then receive a voice message back from them. Be like, hey, thank you so much for the warm welcome. We feel really at home here. We've named our first bird after you.
Oh, I
In
love
six
that.
months, in 6 months, that's what I'd love to be publicly wrong about, but I'd also love to be publicly right about it as well. All right, what's the next question you got? I think considering the techno music in the background, we've probably got one question each.
All right. I got one for both of us. So, and it's a little bit of a lifestyle one, but since this is given by our agents and also get to us, it's what is in your, or what's your non-negotiable travel kit? The 3 to 5 things you'd you cherish the most when you travel?
Easy, easy, easy. So 3, right? Or 3 to 5.
3 to 5, up to you.
Okay, so one of mine is definitely a hammock, and I just find having a hammock to travel with is just invaluable. And not one of those like hippy dippy like rock climbing multicolored hammocks, but one of those like really nice simple green or like one color. It's like a nice fabric. I've been practicing daydreaming quite a lot as a way, or as just space to be more creative. The 15, 20 minutes a day type thing is such a beautiful rest on the body and then rest on the mind. But then I find it really quite a creative and grateful space to be. So hammock is definitely one I always travel with. I have these really nice traveling chopsticks that unscrew in the middle. So those are like my traveling utensils. And then I've actually just upgraded, but a water bottle. I've got a traveling thermos now. It was a water bottle, and now it was a stainless steel water bottle, and now I've like made it a stainless steel thermos. So those are my 3 that jump out immediately.
I like that. They're very river. I've got a little story before I kick this off, because like there's all the practical stuff. You need a passport, you need a wallet, etc. My story is that before I left Portugal about 6 months ago, I had a conversation with a friend, and he was saying that he was about to go on a trip, and that the day before he left, he couldn't find his wallet, and we laughed about it, and it was so silly. And then I went to leave, and I couldn't find my wallet, and so I left Portugal without a wallet in November, and I went to Japan, New Zealand, Mexico, Brazil, and Indonesia without a wallet, no ID, no cards. I've been using Apple Pay, and I've made it through all of these places. So wallet not needed. My 3 things are a knife of some kind, like a little fold out knife for fruit.
Yeah, but how do you travel with that? Like, how do you even get through security, or you got to check it in?
Most of the time I check it in. I've
Or you
actually got
swallow,
a couple of like
you swallow it before each trip.
I've got a couple of open L's, and I used to have one, like a kind of old fold out knife that I bought in Pakistan a few years ago, and I would travel with it in my carry-on, and it would always make it through security every time, and I'd be like, wow, this is really amazing. Like I should not be allowed this on the flight. And then one day somebody pulled me up on it, and they were like, hey, you can't have this. And this had happened a couple of times before, and I've been like, no, well, it's made it through before, it's fine, like I'm not going to hurt anybody with it. And they had let it through. And then this one time, this one person was like, no, sorry, you can't take this. So I've lost a couple of these, especially like things that I like. But this is it's just such a useful tool. Carrying it around, like taking it for picnics, eating fruit, it's often useful for all sorts of things that I don't think I'm going to need it for. So having a knife, having a camera. I have a camera that I travel with, and a couple of disposable cameras that have been going for maybe a few months now. And what I like about that so much is that it gives me a specific lens to view travel through. So I'll go to a place, and instead of just seeing the place or seeing people, I'll like really have an artistic lens for like the way that the light hits something. It's really nice. Or the disposable cameras are really nice because I'll take them throughout multiple journeys, and then I'll go and develop the film. And when it comes back, it's like Christmas. It's like I get all of these snapshots from like the year that's been. And the other one, and this is always a little bit too heavy, but I take it always anyway, is a speaker. And the speaker is just like having a dance in the kitchen in the morning, having some kind of way to create a vibe or to like bring calm to a situation. Just like having a way to create your own atmosphere is a big one for me. Yeah, I really enjoy it. And coupled with that is every month I make a playlist, and it's the songs that I've most enjoyed that month. And then I can time travel, so I can go, oh, I wonder what it felt like in August 2025. And I can go to August 2025 and play the playlist, and it brings me back into like summer 2025
incredible.
or
That's so
Christmas
cool.
23.
One of my favorite music apps is called Radio, with like 5 O's at the end, and you pick a country on the map and the decade, and it plays music from that era, basically. So I can already see your time travel version of that. Like but personalized. I think that's brilliant. Just a really simple, like a really simple slider, time travel, like so cool.
It would be the kind of thing that Spotify, if anyone from Spotify is listening, I'd like that as a wrapped or some kind of feature um, of, what were your most listened songs in this month, this month, this month. So you can pick a month and go and generate a playlist from it. Pretty pleased.
I think we are.
Looks like we have lost connection, maybe.
All right, it's back.
Hey, there he
Just a
is.
little technical interlude. All right. Last question. Well, at least for this one. But I'm actually really enjoying this question. So this question is called the abundance paradox, and definitely both for both of us to answer. You talk about building towards an abundant future, but every builder I know is running on caffeine, anxiety, and the fear that someone else is shipping faster. Where does the abundance actually start? With tools or with you? Now, I find this question very interesting because I'm not sure how many builders my agent knows in that context. But yeah, I'm wondering what that brings to mind.
It says two things to me, and I think this is something interesting to highlight for anybody that's not working with agents as well, or not working with AI, is it's super clear to both of us immediately what the AI tendency is here in the question. This is just a little bit of an aside, but that every builder I know is very assumptive, sounds very like it knows exactly what is right, which is not true. It's made up. It's very authoritative, exactly. And I can immediately pick out in questions that it asks me in writing, using verbose language, using actually, using all of these things. Anyway, what does abundance look like? I think it's
No. It's not what does abundance look like. It's like you talk about building towards an abundant future, but every builder I know is running on caffeine, anxiety, and the fear that someone else is shipping faster. Where does abundance actually start from? With the tools or with you?
Yeah, it starts with you. It is a mindset, but it's something that needs to be cultivated. And I think that in humans, it happens slowly. Specifically, what comes to mind is there is there's this idea, it's Martec's law, and the idea is that technology evolves at an exponential rate, but humans move or learn linearly. So these systems are evolving like this. We're moving linearly, and there's inevitably a gap between what the technology can do and how fast I, as an individual, can keep up with it. I think it's my responsibility to create the conditions where I feel abundance and where I can use these as tools rather than being directed by them. And it's things like it's cultivating a few specific skills. It's noticing when I'm being led down the rabbit hole by an AI that is just continually asking questions. It's noticing when I'm being trained by a social media algorithm to get a variable reward from swiping, and the practices that I find really help having some kind of routine, some kind of grounding so that I can't get swept up in this stuff.
But like,
And
what's specifically been bringing you to more of a sense of abundance, or more like thinking through that abundant lens?
Honestly, not feeling abundant, feeling like I don't have enough time, feeling like everything is moving too fast has been the trigger to make me want to focus on it. What really gives me a sense of abundance is giving myself a pat on the back, giving you a high five, like actually going, hey, that was pretty good. Like, let's benchmark this against what it might have taken 6 months ago. Wow, that's amazing what we did today. This morning, I walked someone through a basically fully automated podcast setup, from scheduling to post-production to like creating all of this stuff. They're like, wow. And that takes how long? 10 minutes per episode rather than like hours and hours. It's like, cool. We actually can do so much as long as we set those criteria for ourselves. I think that's what it is like really deciding those foundations. What do you find for yourself? What comes up?
I feel like there's two modes of abundance that I feel. Actually, no, there's three now that I think about it, jump out immediately. Abundance in time, abundance in resources, and abundance in relationships. yeah, I definitely like to move towards things that create abundance in all three of those. Like the idea of, and they often cross over a bit as well. So like one example I've kind of done in the past and will continue to do in the future. One was actually born out of a flat tire. So I remember getting a flat tire, and my immediate response is like, why did this happen to me? Like a flat tire, like I can't. And then I've kind of flipped the script and said, oh, flat tires kind of happen, but that's okay. And then so got the car towed, got to the place to get it repaired, and then I paid for two flat tires to be repaired. And the person, the service place is like, what are you talking about? I'm like, so one is for me, and the other one is for someone else, for you to gift. And just all of a sudden, like the relationship became abundant and our relationship became abundant, and then for the rest of the day they then had this like more abundant mindset, and presumably whoever received that gift had that kind of sense of abundance that was gifted to them as well. So just these small little acts, and like I'm in the process now of rebuilding a little farmer's shack in the rice field here in Bali, and it's a couple $100 to rebuild it, but the guys I'm working with, and just the farmers in the area, like it kind of creates this sense of abundance. And also my hope is, the fact that I've supported in building this thing, it becomes kind of a space, a physical space that feels abundant already from the start. And the fact that it's in this rice field looking over what I would consider like one of the most abundant looking spaces there is, it's quite incredible. So yeah, I definitely think it's small little acts that you can do, but I guess you could also call those acts tools in a way. And I keep coming back to this idea that, man makes the tool, but the tool makes the man. So it's this kind of recursive loop, so to speak. And, what kind of comes first and what informs next each stage. And, it's kind of this evolving piece, which is another reason I'm excited to be building tools with you specifically, because I feel like these tools that we're building, um, do allow abundance to emerge for a lot more people. If it can be abundance in time, abundance in resources, and abundance in relationships, like what a beautiful thing to be investing energy towards. Like it's very easy for me to get up in the morning and put energy towards this. It's optimistic. It feels like it's moving in the right direction, and we just have such an exquisite set of tools that are emerging before us, and to be able to help make those tools as they help make us, as opposed to just being victims to the tools in a little sense. Like I look at the social media era and I feel like the tools are incredible. However, a lot of people have fallen victim to the tools. And I'd almost argue that entire social cultures and societies have fallen victim to the tools. The way the social media algorithm works, it spirals down instead of spinning up. So yeah, that's where I see the great opportunities ahead. Um, with that being said, I feel like it's a pretty nice way to wrap up this first episode of the Great Spin-Off. What do you reckon?
That is a fantastic ending. Yeah, I love it.
Well, brother, thanks for your
Good first
time, man.
episode.
I'm so grateful to be building with you, and I'm also really grateful to be learning in public with you. And I'm excited to start to invite some other people into this space to learn from, and to grow with. So onwards and upwards.